They put handcuffs on a man who had done nothing wrong. He did not fight. He did not shout. He only asked one thing. Please. Let me hug my daughter first. They said no. Standing above him, on the marble steps of her own company, Adiz Bello laughed. Take the beggar away, she said. He does not belong in a place like this. Her guests laughed with her. Her assistants laughed with her. Even the officers holding him almost smiled. Nobody laughed at his daughter. Little Ife was 6 years old, and she was screaming his name. Daddy. Daddy, don't let them take you. Emeka Obi did not cry. He looked at his daughter, and he said something strange. Something nobody understood. It's okay, my love. This will be over soon. Very soon. Then he looked up, straight into Adiz's eyes, and he smiled. Not the smile of a broken man. The smile of a man who knew something she did not. 10 minutes later, Adiz Bello's phone rang. She looked at the screen. Her face went pale. By the end of that phone call, she was no longer laughing. She was begging. This is the story of how one poor single father, mocked, humiliated, and handcuffed in front of a laughing crowd, brought down the empire of the woman who thought she owned the world. Stay with me till the end, because what happens next, nobody in that crowd will ever forget. The city of Lagos never slept, but for Emeka Obi, sleep was a luxury he rarely allowed himself. Every morning, before the sun fully rose, he woke his daughter Ife gently, tied her small shoes, and walked her to the tiny nursery school 3 streets from their one-room apartment. Then he went to work at Bello Towers, the tallest, shiniest building in the business district, where he cleaned floors that cost more per square foot than his entire year's salary. Nobody at Bello Towers knew his real name. To them, he was just the cleaner. Some didn't even look at his face when they passed him. He was invisible, the way poor men often are to rich people in a hurry. But Emeka did not complain. He mopped floors with the same care a doctor uses on a wound. He greeted every security guard by name. He always smiled at the young interns who looked tired and overworked. One day, he would whisper to himself sometimes, one day, things will be different. Nobody believed a man like him could say those words and mean them. Nobody knew he had a secret. Adiz Bello was the CEO of Bello Industries, one of the largest conglomerates in West Africa. She was beautiful, sharp, and utterly convinced that money made her better than everyone else. She had built her father's small trading company into an empire: oil, real estate, telecoms, fashion. Her name was on magazine covers. Her face was on billboards. Wherever she walked, people bowed a little, whether they wanted to or not. But power had changed her. Underneath the designer suits and the confident smile, Adiz had become someone who believed the poor deserved their poverty and the rich deserved their comfort. She said things like, "Some people were simply not born for greatness. Poverty is a mindset. I did not fight this hard to be kind to people who never fought at all." Her employees feared her. Her family avoided her temper. And the one person who still loved her, her younger cousin, Kayamika, was the only one brave enough to challenge her. "You've changed, Ada," Kayamika told her once. "Money was supposed to make you free. Instead, it made you cruel." Adiz had only laughed. Cruelty is just confidence that other people can't afford. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of ordinary day nobody expects to become unforgettable. Emeka was mopping the lobby floor when Adiz walked in, heels clicking sharply against the marble, phone pressed to her ear, barking instructions to someone about a cancelled shipment. She wasn't looking where she stepped. Her heel caught the edge of the wet floor sign. She stumbled, hard, and would have fallen if Emeka had not moved fast, catching her arm before she hit the ground. For 1 second, their eyes met. She yanked her arm back like his touch had burned her. "Do you know how much this suit costs?" she snapped, straightening herself, more embarrassed than hurt. "Watch where you put your buckets, cleaner." The lobby went quiet. A few interns tried not to laugh. Emeka simply bowed his head. I'm very sorry, madam. Are you all right? Do I look all right to you? She said coldly. Clean up this mess before someone important sees it. He said nothing more. He picked up his mop and continued working. But something strange happened that day. Adiz found herself glancing back at him from the elevator. There was something about the calm way he had spoken. No fear. No groveling. Just quiet dignity. She didn't like that, she noticed. 2 weeks later, Adiz stayed late at the office, working on a company gala she was hosting, a celebration for Bello Industries' 20th anniversary. She wanted it to be the event of the year. Every important person in Lagos would be there. At almost 9 p.m., exhausted, she took the back stairwell instead of waiting for the elevator. That was when she heard it. A small voice, humming softly. A child's voice. She followed the sound to the staff break room and found a little girl, no older than 6, sitting on a plastic chair, swinging her legs, coloring in a worn notebook. Her school uniform was clean but patched at the elbow. "What are you doing here?" Adiz asked, more surprised than angry. The girl looked up with big, unafraid eyes. "Waiting for my daddy. He said we will go home together after he finishes his work." "And who is your daddy?" The girl smiled proudly. "Emeka Obi. He cleans this whole building. He says one day I will have a room with my own bed, not a mat on the floor." Something tightened in Adiz's chest, though she didn't understand why. "Doesn't he have someone to watch you at home?" The girl shook her head. "My mommy went to heaven when I was small. It's just me and daddy now. But he says we don't need anyone else. He says love is enough." Adiz stood there a long moment, unsure what to say. She had grown up with everything, private schools, drivers, holidays abroad, and yet she had never once heard her own father say something as simple and warm as love is enough. Emeka appeared in the doorway moments later, out of breath. "Ife, I told you to wait for me by the—" He stopped short, seeing Adiz standing there. "Madam. I'm so sorry. She isn't supposed to be here. I'll take her home right now." Adiz looked between the father and daughter, the worn uniform, the patched shoes, the way the little girl reached instinctively for her father's hand the moment he entered the room. "It's fine," Adiz said quietly. Then, almost against her will, she added, "She's a smart girl." Emeka blinked, surprised by the softness in her voice. "Thank you, madam." For the first time, Adiz didn't feel powerful standing in front of him. She felt small. From that night, something shifted, though neither of them said it out loud. Adiz began noticing Emeka more, the way he always arrived early, the way he fixed a wobbling table without being asked, the way he never once asked for anything extra, even when he clearly had so little. One evening, she found herself standing beside him at the elevator, an unusual silence between them. "Why do you work so hard for a job people don't even respect?" she asked, almost testing him. Emeka considered the question seriously before answering. "Because respect isn't something people give you, madam. It's something you carry, whether they see it or not. My daughter is watching how I live. I want her to know that a man's worth isn't measured by his salary." Adiz had no response for that. Nobody had ever spoken to her with such quiet confidence, not the board members who feared her, not the men who tried to court her fortune, not even her own father. Her assistant, Funmi, noticed the change too, and warned her one afternoon. "Ma, people are starting to talk. You've been seen speaking with the cleaner. It doesn't look right for someone in your position." Adiz's jaw tightened. "I speak to whoever I want. Since when do I answer to gossip?" But that night, alone in her penthouse, she stared out at the city lights and asked herself a question she didn't like. Why do I keep thinking about him? Adiz's cousin, Kayamaka, wasn't the only one paying attention. Tebena Chukwu, a wealthy businessman who had been pursuing Adiz for over a year, mostly for the prestige of marrying into the Bello name, began to sense he was losing ground to someone far beneath him in status. Tebena was proud, controlling, and used to getting what he wanted. "You're spending time with the cleaning staff now," he mocked at a dinner one night, loud enough for others to hear. Adiz, be serious. People like that exist to serve people like us. Not to be looked at twice. Adiz felt a flash of anger she hadn't expected. He's a hard worker. That's more than I can say for some people I know. The table went silent. Tabena's face darkened with humiliation, and from that moment, he made it his mission to remind everyone, especially Adiz, exactly where Emeka belonged. Know your place, he muttered under his breath as Emeka passed one afternoon, deliberately loud enough to be heard. Men like you don't rise. You only serve. Emeka said nothing. He simply nodded and kept walking. But little Ife, waiting nearby, heard every word. That night, she asked her father, "Daddy, why do rich people think they're better than us?" Emeka knelt down to her level. They're not better, my love. They just forgot what matters. Don't let anyone make you feel small. Not ever. It was a small thing, really. The kind of detail that meant nothing to most people, but everything to those paying close attention. During a company audit, a compliance officer noticed a strange transaction. A private security firm listed as an anonymous investor had been quietly monitoring several major shipments connected to Bello Industries. The name on the paperwork was blacked out for confidentiality. Two of the senior security guards were seen greeting Emeka with unusual respect one morning, a brief nod, a murmured sir that seemed almost automatic, out of habit rather than politeness owed to a cleaner. Adiz noticed it. She said nothing, but she filed it away. Then there was the watch. One rainy evening, as Emeka helped carry boxes during a storm, his sleeve rode up, revealing a wristwatch, simple, unbranded on the surface, but Adiz had spent enough time around wealthy men to recognize custom craftsmanship when she saw it. It wasn't flashy. It was the kind of understated quality that only people with real money, old money, ever bothered to wear. That's an interesting watch for a cleaner, she said carefully. Emeka pulled his sleeve down quickly. A gift. From someone who mattered to me. He offered no more explanation, and something about his tone told her not to push. The pieces didn't fit. And Adiz, sharp as she was, began to feel a small, uncomfortable seed of suspicion. Who is this man really? Despite the whispers, despite Tabena's cruelty, something tender continued growing between Adiz and Emeka, not spoken, not official, but real. She began finding reasons to stay late, knowing he'd still be there. He began finding small ways to make her laugh, a genuine laugh, not the practiced one she gave at galas and board meetings. One evening, she found him and Ife sharing a simple meal of rice and stew in the break room, and instead of walking past like she once would have, she sat down. "May I?" she asked, almost shy for the first time in years. Ife beamed and scooted over. "You can have some of mine." For an hour, the most powerful woman in Lagos sat on a plastic chair, eating from a small container with a 6-year-old and her cleaner father, laughing at Ife's stories about her class hamster, forgetting entirely about board meetings and shareholder calls. "This is the first time in years I've actually enjoyed a meal," Adiz admitted quietly. Emeka looked at her, something gentle in his expression. "Money buys a lot of things, madam. But it doesn't buy this." "Adiz," she corrected softly. "Just Adiz." It was the first time she had asked anyone, outside her family, to use her name without a title attached. Tabena could not accept being outshone by a cleaner. His pride, wounded and simmering for weeks, finally boiled over. He began digging, quietly, carefully, for anything he could use against Emeka. He hired a private investigator, expecting to uncover a criminal record, a debt, something shameful he could use to humiliate the man publicly and remind Adiz exactly where poor men belonged. Instead, the investigator returned with troubling news. "Sir, I couldn't find much. His records before 5 years ago are sealed. Government-level sealed. I've never seen anything like it outside of." "Outside of what?" Tabena snapped. The investigator hesitated. "Outside of witness protection or classified federal contracts, sir." Tabena dismissed the idea as impossible. A janitor, connected to federal secrecy? Absurd. Instead of backing off, he decided on a different approach, a public one, designed to humiliate Emeka so completely that Adiz would never look at him with warmth again. He planted a story. 2 days before the 20th anniversary gala, an anonymous tip reached Bello Industries' internal security. Cash had gone missing from the executive floor safe, and reliable evidence pointed to a staff member with access to the building after hours. The evidence, of course, had been planted directly into Emeka's locker. The gala night arrived, glittering with everything money could buy: crystal chandeliers, champagne towers. The entire elite of Lagos, dressed in their finest, gathered on the marble steps and grand hall of Bello Towers to celebrate 20 years of the Bello Empire. Emeka was there too, quietly working in the background as always, making sure everything ran smoothly, occasionally glancing toward the entrance where he knew Ife would be waiting with a neighbor after the event. Then the security team arrived, flanked by 2 police officers, marching straight toward him. Emeka Obi, the head of security, announced loudly, deliberately loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "You are under arrest for theft." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Guests turned, phones already rising to record the scandal. "There must be a mistake," Emeka said calmly, though his heart pounded. "I haven't taken anything." "The money was found in your locker," the officer said, snapping handcuffs onto his wrists. "You can explain that at the station." Tabena stood nearby, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk barely hidden behind his champagne glass. And then, Adiz appeared at the top of the marble staircase, drawn by the commotion, dressed in a stunning emerald gown, everyone's eyes shifting instantly to her, waiting for her reaction. For one terrible moment, she hesitated. Doubt, planted carefully by Tabena's whispered evidence earlier that evening, crept into her mind. Could I have been wrong about him? Tabena stepped closer to her, murmuring just loud enough. "You see now, Ada? I told you. People like that don't change. They only wait for opportunity." Something cold settled over Adiz's face, humiliation, at having been seen caring for a man now accused of theft, in front of everyone who mattered in her world. She looked down at Emeka, standing calm and dignified even in handcuffs, and instead of defending him, pride and embarrassment won. "Take the beggar away," she said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "He does not belong in a place like this." The crowd laughed, some out of nervous relief, some out of cruel amusement, following the lead of the woman they all wanted to please. That was when little Ife, who had slipped away from her neighbor to find her father, pushed through the crowd and saw the handcuffs. "Daddy! Daddy, don't let them take you." The laughter died instantly. Even the cruelest guests couldn't laugh at a crying child. Emeka knelt as much as the officers allowed, looking at his daughter with steady, loving eyes. "It's okay, my love. This will be over soon. Very soon." Then he looked up at Adiz, not with anger, not with hatred, but with something that unsettled her far more. Quiet disappointment. And beneath it, the ghost of a smile. The smile of a man who knew something she did not. The officers began walking Emeka toward the police vehicle outside. Adiz stood on the steps, arms crossed, telling herself she had done the right thing, that reputation mattered, that she couldn't be seen defending an accused thief. Then her phone rang. The caller ID made her stomach drop. Director Falana, Federal Ministry of Special Investigations. She had met Director Falana only once, at a state dinner 2 years earlier, a quiet, serious man who oversaw one of the most powerful anti-corruption task forces in the country. Men like Falana did not call CEOs on a whim. With trembling hands, she answered. Hello, Director. This is unexpected." The voice on the other end was sharp, urgent. "Miss Bello, I need you to stop whatever is happening at your building right now. Do not let your security touch Emeka Obi." Her blood went cold. "I'm sorry, how do you know that name?" "Because Emeka Obi is not a cleaner, Miss Bello. He is Special Agent Emeka Obi, one of the most decorated undercover operatives this country has ever had." He has spent the last 8 months embedded inside Bello Industries under federal authorization, investigating a smuggling and money laundering operation running through your company's shipping division. Adiz felt the ground tilt beneath her. That's impossible. It is very possible, and very real. And right now, your security team, acting on false evidence almost certainly planted by someone trying to expose or eliminate him, is about to compromise a federal operation 8 months in the making. If Agent Obi is harmed, or if this operation is blown, you will not be facing a scandal, Miss Bello. You will be facing federal obstruction charges. Do you understand me? Adiz could barely speak. I understand. Then fix it. Now. The line went dead. Adiz stood frozen on the marble steps, the phone shaking in her hand, the laughter of moments ago replaced by a roaring silence in her ears. She had just called an undercover federal agent a beggar, in front of 200 guests, while his daughter screamed for him. Stop. Adiz's voice cracked across the hall as she ran down the marble steps, heels forgotten, gown trailing behind her. Release him. Release him right now. The officers hesitated. Ma'am, we have evidence. The evidence is fake, she shouted. Call your commanding officer. Call Director Falana at the Federal Ministry of Special Investigations. Do it now, or I promise you, your career ends tonight. Confusion rippled through the crowd. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to shocked silence. At that exact moment, 3 black federal vehicles pulled up outside Bello Towers. Serious-looking agents stepped out, moving with practiced authority, straight past the stunned guests. At the front walked Director Falana himself. Release Agent Obi immediately, he commanded, flashing federal credentials that made even the arresting officers go pale. The handcuffs came off. Emeka rubbed his wrists, calm as ever, and knelt to pull Ife into his arms, holding her tightly as she cried into his shoulder. Gasps spread through the crowd like wildfire. Agent Obi? Undercover? He's federal police? Director Falana turned to address the stunned crowd, his voice carrying easily across the silent hall. For the past 8 months, Special Agent Emeka Obi has worked undercover inside this company, gathering evidence of a massive smuggling operation running through Bello Industries shipping contracts, an operation worth an estimated 4 billion naira in laundered goods. Every eye in the room turned toward Tebena Chukwu, whose champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The evidence tonight, Falana continued, the supposedly stolen money planted in Agent Obi's locker, was itself part of a cover-up attempt, traced directly back to a shipping contract owned by Mr. Tebena Chukwu, who we now believe planted false evidence specifically to expose and remove Agent Obi from this investigation before it could be completed. 2 federal agents moved calmly toward Tebena, who backed away, stammering. This is a misunderstanding, I have lawyers, I have. You have the right to remain silent, one agent said flatly, and the handcuffs that had been on Emeka's wrists minutes earlier now closed around Tebena's instead. The crowd that had laughed at Emeka now stared at him in stunned, humiliated silence. Someone whispered, just loud enough to carry, you called him a gatekeeper. Now his own agency owns half the security contracts inside this building. Adiz stood frozen, staring at the man she had called a beggar, the man who had rescued her hamster stories and rice and stew dinners, the man whose daughter she had grown to adore, the man she had publicly humiliated in front of everyone who mattered to her. The truth hit her all at once. Every clue, the sealed records, the quiet authority the guards showed him, the fine watch, the calm confidence that never once cracked, it all made sense now. He hadn't been hiding poverty. He had been hiding a mission. And she had thrown him away in front of the entire city, laughing. The gala ended in chaos, guests whispering, phones capturing the story that would be on every front page by morning. Billionaire humiliates undercover federal agent, fiancé's fraud exposed. Adiz found Emeka the next morning at the small nursery school, waiting to pick up Ife. She had barely slept, rehearsing what to say, none of it feeling adequate. Emeka. Her voice broke. I am so sorry. I should have trusted you. Instead, I chose my reputation over you, in front of everyone, and I said something horrible about a man who never once gave me a reason to doubt him. Emeka watched her with quiet, tired eyes. Do you know what hurt the most, Adise? It wasn't the handcuffs. I've worn worse for this job. It was watching you decide, in front of 200 people, that I wasn't worth defending. My daughter watched that too. She watched the woman I let her grow close to look at her father like garbage. Adise's eyes filled with tears. I know. I have no excuse. You don't need an excuse, he said gently. But you do need to understand, trust isn't something I can hand back just because the truth came out and made things easier for you. If I really had been just a cleaner, would you have still defended me? The question hung heavy in the air. Adise had no honest answer, and they both knew it. I don't know, she finally admitted, voice trembling. But I want to become someone who would. Emeka studied her for a long moment. That's the first honest thing you've said to me. He didn't forgive her that day. He simply walked away with Ife's hand in his, leaving Adise standing alone with the weight of her own choices. In the weeks that followed, Adise did something nobody expected of the ice-cold CEO of Bello Industries. She changed, not with grand speeches or performative gestures, but quietly, consistently. She personally testified against Tebena, providing financial records that helped seal the federal case against him. She overhauled her company's shipping division, firing corrupt executives who had profited from the smuggling operation for years. She started a scholarship fund for children of single parents working in her company. The first name added to the recipient list, without his knowledge, was Ife Obi. She stopped attending galas designed purely to be seen. She started showing up, quietly, to volunteer at the same nursery school where Ife studied, helping other overworked single parents with school fees and small kindnesses that never made headlines. Kayamaka noticed the change first. You're different, she said one evening. Softer. I like it. I almost lost something because I cared more about how I looked than who I was, Adise admitted. I don't want to be that person anymore. Emeka noticed too, though he said nothing for a long time. He watched from a careful distance as Adise rebuilt herself, brick by brick, the same patient way he had once mopped floors he didn't own, in a building where nobody knew his real name. It was Ife, in the end, who brought them back together. 3 months after the gala, she ran up to Adise outside the nursery school, holding a crumpled drawing. I made this for you. The drawing showed 3 stick figures holding hands, a man, a little girl, and a woman with long hair, standing in front of a small house with a bright yellow sun overhead. Is that me? Adise asked, throat tight. Daddy says people can change if they really try, Ife said simply. I think you're trying really hard. Adise looked up and found Emeka standing a few feet away, watching, arms crossed but his expression softer than she'd seen in months. She has strong opinions, he said. She gets that from someone, Adise replied, wiping her eyes quickly. They stood in silence for a moment before Emeka spoke again. I watched what you did. The scholarship fund. The testimony against Tebena. Firing men who could have made your life easier if you just looked away. I wasn't doing it to win you back, Adise said quietly. I was doing it because I finally understood what you meant, about respect being something you carry. Emeka studied her for a long moment, the way he once studied evidence, searching for truth beneath the surface. I know, he finally said. That's exactly why I believe you now. It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't fireworks or music swelling in the background. It was simply a father, a daughter, and a woman who had finally learned humility, standing together outside a small nursery school, the late afternoon sun warm on their shoulders. Can we get ice cream? Ife asked, breaking the tension the way only a child can. All 3 of us? Emeka laughed, a real, warm laugh, and looked at Adise. Well? Are you free, Miss Bello? Adise smiled, the first truly peaceful smile she'd worn in years. For you too? Always. The scandal at Bello Towers had long since faded from headlines, replaced by newer stories, newer gossip. But those who had stood on those marble steps that night never forgot what they witnessed, a woman's pride destroyed and rebuilt in the space of a single phone call. Tobena Chukwu was serving 8 years for fraud, smuggling, and obstruction of a federal investigation. His name, once respected in Lagos business circles, was now a warning story told to young executives about the cost of arrogance. Bello Industries had become known for something new, not just profit, but purpose. Adiz restructured the company around ethical practices, community investment, and fair treatment of every employee, from the boardroom to the cleaning staff. Emeka still worked with the federal agency, though his cover, once blown, meant a new chapter. He now trained young agents, teaching them the patience and humility that had made his own undercover work so effective. Authority isn't loud, he told his trainees. The strongest people I've ever met carried the least noise about themselves. On a quiet Saturday morning, under a flowering frangipani tree in the garden of a modest but comfortable home, Emeka slipped a simple ring onto Adiz's finger, not the flashy diamond Tobena had once offered her, but a ring with a small, meaningful inscription inside: respect is carried, not given. Ife, now 7, stood beside them in a white dress, grinning from ear to ear, finally getting the family she had quietly wished for the night she sat coloring in a break room, waiting for her father. "Does this mean you're really my mommy now?" Ife asked, tugging Adiz's dress. Adiz knelt down, tears in her eyes, and pulled the little girl into a tight hug. "It means I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Behind them, the sun set gently over Lagos, the same city where a laugh once echoed cruelly across marble steps, now replaced by something far quieter, far stronger. Love, finally, that didn't need to prove itself with money. Love that had been tested by handcuffs, humiliation, and a phone call that changed everything, and had come out, against every odd, unbroken. She once said he didn't belong in a place like that. In the end, he built her a better one, out of forgiveness, patience, and a love that never needed an empire to prove it was real. Alternate ending line. They handcuffed the wrong man that night, and in doing so, they freed the woman she was always meant to become.